Can you smell that, kiddies? That is the smell of something special. That is the smell of a monster movie. I dug up a real good one for you today, kids. The story of a man who made a monster. The original horror show. This is Frankenstein. Let's take a look. It was a bloody Valentine's, the February of 1931, when Universal unleashed Dracula. Not to be outdone by any competition, they quickly set about working on a follow-up. The most obvious choice came in the form of Mary Shelley's 1818 novel, Frankenstein. Lugosi, originally slated to play the scientist's misunderstood monster, was replaced by the relatively unknown supporting star Boris Karloff shortly after the film changed directors. Frankenstein begins with a classic bit of showmanship. Edward Van Salone, who you may remember as Van Helsing in Dracula, addresses the audience out of character, saying that the film you are about to see should not be taken lightly.
I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you.
From there, we dive right into a gothic cemetery where Colin Clive's Herr Frankenstein and Dwight Frye's hunchbacked Fritz are stealing a body right out from under the nose of its mourners.
He's just resting, waiting for a new life to come.
For those wondering why the hunchback isn't named Igor, that's because Igor didn't show up until the sequels. He was played by Bela Lugosi in Son of Frankenstein and Ghost of Frankenstein, and he wasn't a hunchback, but instead a broken-necked blacksmith. The Igor thing is just something that happened with the retelling over the years.
But they told me it was Igor.
Well, they were wrong then, weren't they?
Back to the plot, Frankenstein, against the judgment of his friends and colleagues, fashions a human being from the pieces of different corpses and brings it to life during a spectacular storm on his mountain laboratory.
Oh, it's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
The monster, a sympathetic brute with an abnormal brain, tries his best to fit in, but is tormented at every turn and fails to recognize the strength of his own body. It culminates in a slew of murders on Frankenstein's wedding day and a hunt across the countryside with torch-wielding villagers that ends in a final face-off between creature and creator. Whew! If you've never seen this movie, you owe yourself the favor of checking it out. Everything that we recognize from those old horror movies that has become part of the cinematic shorthand comes from Frankenstein. The film's director, James Whale, proved time and again when he came to Hollywood that he had a talent for rich visuals and clever wit, and this film was just the tip of the iceberg. Of course, the real showstopper here is Karloff, delivering an unbeatable performance in an unforgettable makeup by Jack Pierce. It may be easy to take for granted now because it is a silent performance, but the level of restraint he shows and the emotion that still manages to escape from his hooded eyes is heartbreaking. I can say from experience that the scene where he tries to befriend the little girl is still effective, usually eliciting gasps even from younger, jaded viewers.
No, you're hurting me! No!
Colin Clive is also great as Henry Frankenstein.
You never wanted to look beyond the clouds and the stars, or to know what causes the trees to bud, and what changes the darkness into light?
You know, everyone always refers to him as Dr. Frankenstein, but he's not really a doctor at all. In the novel and in the movie, he's actually a med school dropout. Go figure. When I called Frankenstein a monster movie, that wasn't just hyperbole. I meant that in the most definitive sense. When someone lays down the phrase monster movie, I usually think of two things: King Kong tearing through the native village in the 1933 film, and Karloff's monster gazing up at the sunlight. Unlike Dracula, which only had 2 direct sequels, Universal exploited the shit out of Frankenstein, with 3 direct sequels and 4 crossover movies all following the monster through an odyssey of gothic terror. And even though the writers didn't always know what to do with his character, the name was always prominent in the title. But that's okay with me, because you know what? I like Frankenstein, and to this day, he still remains my favorite of the Universal monsters. I hope you enjoyed this week's review, kiddies. Until next time, I want you to get some sleep, because next week, it's going to get a little somber. A little dark, too. So, until then, pleasant nightmares.